Hello, BookTube. David Wiley and I are doing an impromptu read-along of The Lord of the Rings. We're being joined by Tony from An Erudite Adventure, and we are taking a slightly unconventional approach of starting cold with The Two Towers, the middle part of Tolkien's book, instead of starting with The Fellowship of the Ring. I found this to be very fruitful so far. And the two towers in question are the two sources of aggression in the novel. The Tower of Orthanc, located in the center of Isengard, the stronghold of the wizard Saruman, who was originally, a long, long time ago, on the side of the good guys, but has decided to make a play for independent power on his own, and has been the source of all of the chapters that we've read so far in the Two Towers. He has been the center of that. The war of the Kingdom of Rohan against Isengard has been the center of what we've been reading so far. The other tower is Barad-dûr, the center, the stronghold of the Dark Lord Sauron in Mordor, who is attempting to recover the One Ring to rule them all, the ring that he made ages ago, and which he imbued with a huge amount of his own sorcerous energy. So it's a very baleful and evil thing in the wrong hands. That's why Saruman wanted to get his hands on it. And if Sauron were to recover it, it would mean the end of everything on Middle-earth. It would mean his total domination of men, creatures, the weather, everything. Middle-earth would become his possession. The good guys don't want that to happen, of course, and they decide to set out a Fellowship of the Ring, 9 characters, to go south to the Kingdom of Gondor, which is at war directly with Mordor. Not just sorceress war, but arms and men against orcs, that sort of thing. And somehow bring the ring into Sauron's kingdom without him knowing it, because it's only in the heart of Sauron's kingdom, in the fires of Mount Doom, that the ring can be destroyed. And the good guys, led by the wizard Gandalf and Aragorn, the heir to the throne of Gondor, want to do that. They want to destroy the ring. They don't want to use it. It can't be used for good. They want to get its peril removed from the world. But it has an amazingly, well, like I said, an evil, a baleful influence. And not everyone in the Fellowship is agreed on destroying it. A character named Boromir, a tall, powerful warrior guy, who has come from Gondor to seek advice and maybe aid. Once he learns what the One Ring is, he doesn't understand why the forces of good would want to destroy it instead of using it to destroy Sauron. It's clear that it might have the power to do that. He is informed that that is not possible. The ring is thoroughly evil, and it turns everything, all of its uses, to evil ends. There's no way to use it for good. And the only way to use it effectively at all would be if someone, the person who used it, already had indigenous power of their own, which just takes them 2 steps further towards being a new Dark Lord, not overthrowing the old one forever, but getting rid of the old one and putting a new one in his place. Boromir doesn't quite believe that, and when the Fellowship has set off on its journey, he tries to take the ring from its bearer, the hobbit Frodo, to Frodo's horror. And Frodo escapes from Boromir, and he and his servant Sam flee from the Fellowship and continue on their quest to walk the One Ring into Mordor and destroy it. And at the same time that Frodo flees from Boromir, an orc band attacks what remains of the Fellowship, and they kill Boromir, and they kidnap 2 of the hobbits that are along with the Fellowship, Merry and Pippin. And that has been the source of all of the book that we've been reading so far. All of the Two Towers has been the attempts of Aragorn and other characters to chase after the band that kidnapped Merry and Pippin. The revelation that the wizard Gandalf, who they thought was dead, is actually back alive again. And the efforts on the part of Gandalf and the rest of the good guys to help the Kingdom of Rohan in its war against the evil wizard Saruman. That has been all of the book that we have seen so far. We have met a revived and purified Gandalf. We have met his mighty warhorse, Shadowfax. We have seen Aragorn revealed as far, far more Then the slightly suspicious ranger, Strider. We've seen Ents, incredibly impressive 14-foot tall tree creatures that have previously existed only in the folklore and legend of most of the people in Middle-earth. And we've gone to war with King Denethor, or with King Theoden of Rohan. We have gone to war with him against the forces of Isengard. It's been breakneck, epic stuff. It's been very different in its tone and tenor from, for instance, the way the Fellowship of the Ring begins. A lot of readers are traumatized by the way the Fellowship of the Ring begins. It begins, first of all, with a long treatise about hobbit agriculture. It's just deadly, absolutely deadly. And it proceeds from there, even once the action picks up a little, it proceeds from there to a lot of walking, a lot of walking around. That has traumatized more than one Fellowship first-time reader that I have known, is the huge amount of walking involved. Tolkien never misses it. He was fond of an outdoor ramble himself, and it clearly shows in the book. And that is gone in the first part of in this book, in the Two Towers. That is gone. Instead, we have what I imagine a lot of younger readers would consider to be proper epic fantasy. We have sorcery, good and bad. We have turns of action. We have dramatic events and high-pitched dramatic language. Very quasi-King James dramatic language for all of those early chapters. And that all changes now. That all changes with this. We are moving now into the next book, book 4. And the chapter is called The Taming of Smeagol. And attentive readers will remember that Gandalf has pieced together the history of how the ring came to be found. The One Ring was lost to history for thousands of years in the Great River Anduin. And gradually Gandalf pieces together the story of how it was found, and it eventually came into the possession of a hobbit-like creature named Sméagol. And it broke his mind, and it drastically lengthened his life, and it wore away his physical appearance until he became just a withered thing, basically hunched around the core of his addiction to the ring. And characterized not by his name, which is he's long forgotten it, but by the weird sound that he makes in his throat, Gollum. This is the character we meet in The Hobbit. This is a signature Tolkien character. He returns in this chapter, but that would be one thing. That's the least of the gambles that this chapter takes. This chapter is unlike almost anything that I have read in fantasy literature. We get the adventures that we've been following this month so far of our heroes. And like I mentioned last time, when that chapter ends, the last chapter ends there, the Palantir, the name of that chapter is the Palantir. When that chapter ends, we are naturally expecting, a first-time reader is naturally expecting that, okay, well, we're completely invested in these characters. Their war with Saruman has ended. They have unexpectedly achieved complete victory. Now they need to do something else. Gandalf says that himself. If we fail, we fall. If we succeed, we move on to the next task. The next task is obviously to take the war to Gondor. They can't do anything about the central item of their quest. Gandalf has said this already. The ring has passed beyond them. Frodo and Sam are too far away for the good guys, for the rest of the heroes, for anybody to catch up with them and help them with their quest. Snarky readers of The Lord of the Rings will wonder why Gandalf can't ask Gwaihir the Windlord and the other eagles of Mandos to fly the good guys to Frodo and Sam, to find them and bring help to them. The answer to those snarky readers is very simple. They just do it to nitpick. And any attempt like that would draw Sauron's attention straight to what's happening. The whole hope of the world rests on the fact that Sauron does not imagine that anyone would want to destroy the ring. The most that he imagines is that the great powers of the West have it And sooner or later they will fall out amongst themselves because it only has one master. Only one hand can wield the ring, so don't talk to me about we. Sauron is waiting for that because that's in his nature. So he doesn't believe otherwise. And he must not believe otherwise. He must not even think it's possible. As Gandalf says, if Sauron had concentrated all of his forces on closing off every square inch of Mordor, surveilling it all the time with birds, other fell creatures, and also his winged Nazgul, he would have found it, and all hope would have been gone. The only hope here is that it never crosses his mind to think about that stratagem. So, of course, you're not going to send eagles with a reconnaissance and force to go and help Sam and Frodo. Just the same reason you're not going to send eagles to bring Sam and Frodo to Mount Doom. You're not going to do that because the minute you draw Sauron's attention to this, you lose. So, unbeknownst to anyone involved, this was not a planned thing. Frodo's plan to walk into Mordor with just Sam is probably the thing that helps it to work. Nevertheless, that might be fine in a plot sense, but it's not fine in a narrative sense. Gandalf has hooked the reader. The first book of The Two Towers is amazingly good reading. It's amazingly exciting reading, although we've noted that it did conform to a pattern. There's a broad pattern involved. It's only broken once. And that is that characters meet, usually somebody they don't expect, whether it's Gandalf himself, or the Riders of Rohan, or even Pippin through the Palantir meeting Sauron. It's no matter who it is, the pattern has been that people meet somebody they don't expect. They do a lot of talking and catching up, and then they say, off we go. That's how the chapter usually ends, with off we go. And that's how we change our scene. And we just keep expecting that that's going to happen. But in this chapter, in the rest of The Two Towers, Tolkien takes a drastic step, a drastic gamble. He changes the narrative completely to follow Frodo and Sam on their way to Mordor. Now, they're being shadowed by Smeagol, by Gollum. That's why the title is called this. But even so, gone is the action. Gone is the grandiose pacing. Gone is even the grandiose language. Grim and fell broke the morning after that sere and seamless night, and loath were our heroes to see the sunlight, for it forebode the dwellings of the day. That kind of Sir Walter Scott meets the King James Bible diction goes away completely. That changes. It's not just that we change our characters completely. It's that we change our books completely. Even the diction reads like it was written by a different author. It's a huge gamble because you're not 100% sure as an author that your readers are sufficiently invested in you, just in general, you, Tolkien, to change their books. It's a huge gamble. It requires an enormous amount of either confidence or foolhardiness on the part of the author. Famously, 5-6 decades later, George R.R. Martin does the same thing in A Song of Ice and Fire. One of those books is essentially his shift to Sam and Frodo, his shift away from the main set of characters and the main arcs of action, in which all of his readers have become invested. I'm just going to drop all of that and move on to something else. And I trust that you will all come along with me. We all know as readers that Sam's quest is more important than all of the military toing and froing that's going on. We all know that. We are no more fooled by the events in the first part of The Two Towers than is Gandalf, or Aragorn, or even King Theoden. We know perfectly well that against the full might of Mordor there is no hope of arms. Yes, we've won a victory against Saruman, due to an unexpected confluence of events. The forces of Rohan were able to hold on against an onslaught from Saruman's forces just long enough for the Ents, who he didn't expect at all, to destroy his stronghold. At the same time that was unexpected, it was also unexpected that Saruman would encounter a Gandalf who's suddenly more powerful than he is. That could have gone completely differently. The old Gandalf the Grey, might well have been dominated by Saruman. Saruman might have been able to turn him against his friends. Those two things together bring about Saruman's downfall. But that isn't going to help against Sauron. There is no hope of fighting and winning against Mordor. There is no last minute hope. We know that the only hope there is Frodo's hope. Destroy the ring and you destroy Sauron. And it's a very slim hope now, because Sam and Frodo are walking into Mordor on their own. Who knows when they'll get there, or whether the slightest encounter, the smallest little fugitive orc band out on a reconnaissance mission, 2 orcs together, 3, would be enough to ruin that mission, absolutely ruin it. We expect, first-time readers might expect, that we would cut to Sam and Frodo for a chapter, the Taming of Smeagol, find out what they're doing, find out what's going on, and then back to the main action. Because the ring action, the one ring action, is just more walking. It's just more walking. Surely Tolkien won't do that. Or if he's going to do that, surely it won't be long that Sam and Frodo are walking before they meet not just Gollum, but, I don't know, maybe their own version of Ents, something supernatural and unexpected that will help them. Maybe a band of elves, a band of dwarves, something like that. That doesn't happen at all. Not only does the diction change from fell and fair, the morning broke, to, oh, well, I don't see how we're going to do this, Mr. Frodo. The chapter isn't 2 pages in before Sam is going on, allowed to go on by Tolkien, for paragraph after paragraph about his uncle and his uncle's rope walks, or about his old gaffer, quibbling, squabbling back and forth between Sam and his master. There is great writing, and I am counting on this particular read of Two Towers to show me that with a greater emphasis than any other reading of Lord of the Rings has done for me. I feel a loyalty to Tony and a loyalty to David to read these things afresh. I don't think I'm the only lover of the Lord of the Rings who tends to skip these chapters in his rereads. I don't think I'm the only one. Don't judge me. I don't think I'm the only one who tends to do that. I'm not only not going to do that this time around, I'm going to pay extra attention to what's happening in these chapters and maybe come to appreciate them a little better. And right away I noticed that the action is small, but Tolkien is still just wonderful on the page. I want to read you a passage here where Frodo and Sam they're scrabbling in the rocks. It takes them forever to go like 10 feet. They're scrabbling in the rocks trying to figure out how to get down from the rocky wasteland of the Emyn Muil. They don't have a company of big people anymore. They have to figure out how to do that. And at one point they stand and look out over the world. And Tolkien immediately gives us a broad perspective. With that, he stood up and went down to the bottom of the gully again. He looked out. Clear sky was growing in the east once more. This is after a sudden storm. The skirts of the storm were lifting, ragged and wet, and the main battle had passed to spread its great wings over the Emyn Muil, upon which the dark thought of Sauron brooded for a while. Thence it turned, smiting the vale of Anduin and the hail and lightning, and casting its shadow upon Minas Tirith with threat of war. Then, lowering in the mountains and gathering its great spires, it rolled on slowly over Gondor and the skirts of Rohan, until far away the riders on the plains saw its black towers moving behind the sun as they rode into the west. And here, over the desert and the reeking marshes, the deep blue sky of evening opened once more, and a few pallid stars appeared, like small white holes in the canopy above the crescent moon. And that is Tolkien or Frodo anyway, sort of equating the storm with the thought, the evil intent of Sauron, and reminding us of the broad map of the action, even though that broad map is absolutely missing from this chapter. We get little intimations like that, but most of the chapter is concerned with what Frodo and Sam are going to do when they realize that Gollum is following them. They've known all along, but they didn't know how close he was or how persistent he was, and finally they've had enough and decide to confront him and capture him and make him swear on the One Ring. Swear on the precious. How dare you? How dare you, Gollum says. It's too precious even to swear on. They make him swear on the ring to do them no harm, to serve them, to help them. Because Gollum has been to Mordor. It's possible he knows the way. It's possible that he's being drawn there. course, his time in Mordor was not, roses and honey cakes. He was tortured there. He went there and was tortured there. That ought to give pause to our two hobbits, but they are not the brightest bulbs in the hobbit box. Neither one of them is. Uh, Sam is meant to be a kind of uh, stand in for a good, salt of the earth, honest English yeoman of the type that was vanishing when Tolkien was writing this book. Sam is meant to be that, and he is, very much so. And how much patience you have for that will vary. Let's just say, from reader to reader, it will vary. And Frodo, I know he's in some senses the hero of the book. I myself think that Sam is the hero of the book, but uh, in some senses Frodo is the hero of the book. But for whatever reason, I Tolkien just makes him such a whiny character. He is whining right away in this first chapter. We have God knows how much longer to spend cheek to jowl with this little pisher, and he's whining already about how I just want this to be over with. Oh, this is such a terrible thing. Oh, this is so awful. Oh, my Manilows are going. My flip flops are going to be absolutely destroyed by these rocks. He's whining right from the beginning about all this stuff that woe is me, woe is me. But they push on, and once they've tamed Gollum and gotten at least the vestige of his cooperation, they're fools to trust him. They don't trust him, but they trust him a lot more than they should. But once they've tamed him and gotten at least the form of his agreement, they push on. So in that sense, the old pattern that we've noticed resumes. In fact, hilariously, I'd completely forgotten this when I started characterizing this way. But the end of this chapter, at the end of this chapter of the Taming of Smeagol, a character actually does say, "Off we go." So that pattern at least happens again. Characters meet somebody. In this case, Sam and Frodo meet Gollum up close and personal for the first time. Remember, earlier in the book, Frodo is outraged by the very thought of Gollum's existence and wishes to Gandalf that Bilbo had killed him when Bilbo had the chance. And Gandalf cautions him to pity. This is a pitiable figure, and it's not your place to deal out death to him just because he annoys you. Frodo finds it easy to do that because he hasn't met Gollum yet. Now he has, and he sees where that pity comes from. They meet, they talk a bit, and then off we go. So that is the Taming of Smeagol. I am absolutely determined to read these chapters with fresh eyes, and I admit I got a lot more out of the Taming of Smeagol than I expected to, and it only gets better from there. I know in terms of just what happens next, items of intrigue, it only gets better from there. One of the title chapters makes it seem not, but things start to happen. We are, those of you who are familiar with, for instance, the movies, will know we get the Dead Marshes, Shelob, a whole bunch of stuff. We get stuff. Stuff is going to happen. I just need to console myself. I need to reconcile myself with the total change of the book. This is not a shift like you would get in a modern fantasy novel between the point of view of one character and the point of view of another, and then you go to a third, then you go to a fourth, then you come back to the first one. This isn't that. Tolkien is writing a different book. It's about two different characters in a completely different setting, in a completely different scale, with completely different language. It's a huge gamble. And I've always considered it thrilling and also a mistake. Usually I have thought, well, yes, Frodo's errand is more important, but it's also more prosaic. It's two people walking. So, out of simple courtesy to your readers, if you're going to break to them, you should break to them for a chapter or two at most, not half a book. I've always thought that was a misstep. I'm going to trust that this read along will teach me the error of my ways. So we will continue tomorrow. I hope we'll continue tomorrow, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.